Change isn't just coming, it's already here. This is Ask for Change podcast, hosted by leadership expert Meredith Elliott Powell. Brings you weekly conversations with leaders and experts who are redefining success in a world of disruption. Let's begin today's journey and turn uncertainty into your competitive advantage.
Let's turn uncertainty into your competitive advantage. Well, everybody, welcome back. It is one of my favorite times of the week. It is time to dive in to Ask for Change, the show where we talk about everything that you need to know to really turn uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. And I got to tell you, I got an expert on the stage with me today, somebody who has learned to dance in discomfort. You know, my guest today has a lot of energy, a lot of ideas, an incredible sense of humor. And sometimes I think that covers up just how brilliant she is when it comes to dancing in discomfort. So welcome to the show, Anne. Super excited to have you here.
You, Meredith, I need you to follow me around and say that every morning, please.
Well, I mean, really, you are an international keynote speaker. You're a change management authority. You're the author of one of my favorite titles, Just Get Over It. And you're just a ton of fun. But you've been at this for like 20 years, right?
Well, I mean, I've been doing the change thing for about 52 years, but I've been professionally speaking and studying it for 10 years. Yeah.
Well, so let's start there. Let's, for our audience members that don't know you, back up, give us a little bit of your background. And what was it of all the areas you could focus on in life, all the areas that you could, give your attention, expertise, and research to? Why was it this particular area?
Yeah. So by the time I was 7 years old, we had already moved 4 times. And
Wow.
I got home from second grade and my parents sat me and my older brother down and said, we're moving to Saudi Arabia. And we lived in Saudi for 2 years. We lived in Egypt for a year. We lived in Athens, Greece for 4 years. Then I headed to boarding school to sing opera in the woods of Michigan for 3 years to finish out high school. Then from a career standpoint, I started out as a special needs teacher. I then went on and trained seals and sea lions at the aquarium in Boston, and then birds of prey down in Tucson, Arizona. Then I got divorced and decided I needed a big kid job, worked for Under Armour for a while, worked for a company that does group exercise out of New Zealand, and then was in New York City with a large gym chain before I was like, well, I don't really like my life right now. I think I'm going to move out of New York City, move into my parents' basement in northern Michigan and start all over again and blow up my life and see if I can be a motivational speaker. So when it was time to think about like, okay, I've done the whole, I can speak on that. Yeah, I can speak on that. And like drove myself crazy.
Yeah.
Finally, I was like, look, honey, you gotta settle it down and figure out a topic that you zero in on. And the message came back to me like, Anne, you do change. Like, why is that not obvious to you? So I got out of the shower, dried off, and then started doing some more research. But it just made sense that that change and the discomfort of change was a really good place for me to be.
Yeah, because most people really run away from it, but it seems like to be a real superpower for you, correct?
Well, blowing up my life seems to be, and it's funny, it's not for everyone, but it's been really, really fun and rewarding and fulfilling, and it just keeps getting better.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably never been a better time for it, right?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of job security in talking about the discomfort of change these days and helping humans to try to find resilience in it. So, and it's rewarding because shifting people, as you well know, because of all the work you do, shifting people's mindset around uncertainty and discomfort and helping them to find a little comfort in that, or figuring out how do we dance in the rain because it's not going to stop raining, is fulfilling work. It feels pretty good.
So I love this idea, I'm sure you did not, of moving back home to your parents' basement in Michigan. And let me tell you why I'm going to zero in on that, because I feel like a lot of people feel right now like they are in their parents' basement in Michigan, because I don't know a better description to say I am stuck. I hate where I am, but and just the depression that goes with that. I mean, I am assuming, right? Like for those of us who have had that period in your life that is the low point, right? So how did you get out of that basement?
Yeah. Yeah, so fortunately for me, I chose the basement,
Yeah.
and it was, let me restart it. And it wasn't until I got down there and realized I no longer had the corner office in New York City and the corporate American Express card and the business card that was important that people would listen to me that I
Yeah.
went, oh crap, what did I do?
Yeah.
Like, what have I
Right.
done? I did my master's work at Johns Hopkins, for crying out loud. Why am I, working at the Olive Garden asking people if they want soup or salad? Um, and I think part of the motivation to get out was recognizing that I was there, recognizing and saying, all right, you want to stay here? You like,
Mm,
no. Yeah, what you got to do is scary. You got to build a business, build a website, make a speaker reel, do this speaker thing that you don't know anything about this. What are you doing? Well, you could stay here because your parents love you and they'll support you. Or you could stay here in this sad life. This is where I was in New York City. I,
yeah.
everything, I should have been so happy. This was a nice big fat job in New York City with one of the top gym chains in the United States. I had an executive role. Like, it was all good. I should love this. And I didn't want to get out of bed, and it was that moment of, like, is this it? And I remember hearing myself say,
Yeah.
well, this is it. You're 42, and 40 was always like the cutoff where
No
life
kidding. Right.
was out. And I heard that and I was like, girl, you've got 20 something years of work left at the rate of your retirement. You got 47 years of work. And this is not it. I don't want to wake up every morning feeling like this. And so
Yeah.
the basement moment for me wasn't in my parents' basement.
It
It was
was in New
New
York.
York City when I was in the job that I should have loved in the city that I did love. Um, Miserable.
Yeah.
And it was
That's funny.
that question of, do I want to stay here?
I had a similar thing. I had worked my whole life for the corner office and I got the corner office and I got the country club memberships. And then I realized I didn't want to work in that town. I didn't want to be in that city and I didn't want to be in meetings all day long. And I think you're making such a great point. And for anyone listening to the podcast, your basement can be the low point when you don't know what you did or how you got there. It can also be you worked your whole life for something you actually didn't achieve. But making change is scary, right? And I want to come at it from two different directions. For the individual contributor that doesn't have a leader around them to help them start to deal with the amount of change, because I don't know, what are the stats now, like 4 out of 5 employees are burned out, stressed out, cannot handle any more change. And guess what? More change is coming, right?
Yeah, right.
So for that individual. And then also I want to ask you, I think the fundamental most important job leaders can be doing today is leading people through change, not leading them for today, but leading them for what's coming. So what are your advice when it comes to both of those? And you can answer them in either order.
Yeah. So let's start with the individual contributor, because understanding the individual contributor experience is part of what the leader needs to do. So from an individual contributor standpoint, one of the challenges with uncertainty is the fact that we feel like we don't have any control. We feel like we don't have any control. And so taking a minute to say, all right, wait a minute, what can I control? What can I do something about? Taking that that focus of control, or as they call it in psychology, the internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. External locus of control means that I'm waiting for somebody else to make things better. And that is it feels like you're riding around on a wrecking ball, smashing in on things. You're not driving the wrecking ball. You're just riding on it. And you have no control over what's going on. If you shift that in whatever way you can to what can I do something about? What can I control? Where do I have some agency here? And then get up the gumption to move through it and do that thing you can do something about, whether it's asking questions, getting some feedback, getting some support, talking to somebody, Margarita Monday, whatever it takes, right?
Yeah.
Do something that you can do. You're going to feel a little bit better, a little bit more resilient, a little bit, and it's not great, but sometimes it's just a mindset shift of saying, I need to not take this on every day. How do I figure that out?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a key point because there's so many things you can't control, so many things that
Right.
are happening to you around you that you need to say, okay, that's the reality. I can't change that. I'm not going to sit around and whinge about that. What can I do something about, and how can I actively do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Before you jump into leaders, I want to ask you, like, that is so brilliant and it's so flipping simple. Why do we struggle to focus on what we can control and to forget about the rest?
It's not simple,
Yeah.
actually. It's simple. It's not
Not
easy. How about
easy.
that? Right? Um, it takes a whole lot of guts
Yeah.
to say, I'm going to let go of my attachment to the that I feel at everybody else, because then I get to start taking responsibility for me. And it's a massive emotional intelligence skill. That's why I speak on both emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and the stories we tell ourselves, and change, because they are so
So,
inextricably linked. Right? But it's hard to say, I'm going to let go of being constantly angry and frustrated at everything else, accept that as the reality that I can't do anything about, and now take control of things I can do something about. And that's what I did when I was in that New York job. I quit
yeah.
it. I put my ego and my furniture in a U-Haul and said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I can't tolerate what's happening here. I'm going to go do something else. And it was
Yeah.
terrifying, but holy crap, am I glad I did it.
Yeah, exactly. Because you would be someplace that, you were, yeah, just completely miserable. I will have to say it's a lot more fun to go get you a glass of wine and just complain about how much I hate my life. Fixing it is not fun.
Ooh, fixing it is hard. It's scary
Yeah.
because you're now driving.
Right.
Right? I often think about the moment. I don't have any children myself, but I
Yeah.
think about the moment where you make the baby and then you push the baby out and then the doctor gives it to you and makes you leave the hospital. And you're like, holy crap, I'm not supervised. This is how I feel on a
Yeah.
regular basis in my life. Like,
Yeah.
you're driving, you're in the driver's seat. It's scary. But
Yeah.
man, once you get on a roll, it's like, this is spectacular.
Yeah.
Because the internal power you feel,
Oh,
nothing
yeah.
gets you down, because it's like, all right, cool. How can I make something else happen? That didn't
Right.
work. All right, cool. Another direction. I'm taking reality and saying, that's what I'm working with. Great. How do I work with or around that?
Yeah, I think it's so, I'm obsessed with successful people. You probably are too. I mean, we study them to really understand so we can share those strategies. And I think that is one of the major fundamental differences of people who are successful and people who aren't. It isn't money, it isn't connections, it isn't education. It is their ability to focus their mind on what they can control and not to worry about anything else.
I literally just interviewed Kate Delaney, Emmy
Yeah.
award-winning sports journalist. She's broken the glass ceiling in a male-dominated industry. And her whole story is that exact thing
Yeah.
of, I said, okay, cool. That door just slammed in my face. Let's go over here. Let's go over here. How else can we do it? Fine. I'll do it all by myself. And she
Yeah.
did, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So great. All right. So let's switch over to leaders. So
Okay.
there I am, I'm leading people, and the biggest pressure in corporations right now is on that mid-level manager, because they're burned out themselves and they've got a group of people under them that are going, what is leadership asking us to do now? So how do we help people, if we're leaders, navigate the amount and pace of change that is coming at them right now?
Communication, I think, is huge. And there's no easy, like, check this box and everybody will be fine, which is what we want, because but humans are hard. And so leading people through change, communication, creating that two-way dialogue.
Mm.
I had one of my best bosses I ever had at Under Armour, ever in my life, was Tony Ambrosa. And one time, Kevin Plank, the CEO of Under Armour at the time, announced a huge change. And we were all like, what? Tony takes our department into an office, sits us all down and says, okay, complain.
Mm.
And we were like,
What?
are you going to complain? You're like, I'm not gonna go. You're gonna know. So we sat there like crickets in the background for a while. Finally, he goes, look, I want to know, what are you worried about? What are you mad at? What are you losing? What do you think isn't gonna work? It might be something we didn't think about. It might be something I can clear up, or it might be something that I can say, yeah, that's gonna suck. We'll have pizza on Friday. Like he goes, but I want to know what you're thinking. And by creating that quite dangerous conversation, right? By creating that two-way dialogue, he gave us a healthy outlet to share what the challenge was. He started that two-way dialogue by saying, I want to hear what you're scared to tell me. And so as we went forward then, as things weren't going right or were going well, whatever, we had that understanding that we could share the things that were hard. And that, knowing that, helped everything get a lot easier. Just being seen, just being heard, and knowing that he was there for us to provide whatever he could. And we knew that some of the stuff we wanted, he couldn't give us. But that simple connection was invaluable in us all getting through it together.
Yeah, it's I heard this said one time. I think it was from I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and we got every groovy guru you can think of here. There, I think it was one of those groovy gurus. And she had said that your feelings are like a teapot. And if you bottle them up, you're going to blow the back of the teapot out. But if you allow them to be released in a controlled way, they'll come out the front in a beautiful whistle. And if they come out the front in a beautiful whistle, then the teapot is free and you can now solve the problem. And I think a lot of times that leaders they don't want people to complain because they think they have to solve the problem. And like you said, he just fundamentally understood, until my team can release what they're afraid of, they can't find the opportunity to move forward.
I call it squishing the lava down in a volcano.
Yeah.
That only works for so long, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's it. And we need to understand that the two seemingly competing things can occur at the same time. I can be frustrated, angry, and worried about this and still be on board.
Right.
In fact, if I'm allowed to be frustrated, angry, and worried about this, I'm even more likely to get on board. Yeah. And so by allowing those things to exist at the same time, as weird and complicated as it is, that's human.
Yes.
Now we're in this together as people, not just here's the change I need you to implement.
Yeah, absolutely. So going down this whole idea of complaining, I mean, one thing that you really are skilled at is really helping people have difficult conversations.
I thought you were going to say I was good at complaining.
No, I doubt that. But the difficult conversations, and I got to tell you, it's one of the biggest things that leaders avoid. And one of the biggest things that undermines trust from the people that report to them. I remember years ago when I was in corporate, we had two executive regional, our company was split in thirds, and we had most of us reported to two of them. One was Jay was just this hard, you know what? I mean, if you did something wrong, Jay was going to take you out. He didn't care who was in the room. He was going to take you out. The other was Alan, and Alan was so sweet. He was always so kind. He was so nice to you. And we all hated working for Alan because we never knew where we stood. We were so much more comfortable working for Jay, because if Jay gave you a compliment, you knew you were on board. If Jay took you out, you better get it together, right? So it was so odd because he was a tough SOB, but at least I knew things there. So talk a little bit about, I'm curious why we avoid the difficult conversations and what you do to help leaders have those difficult conversations.
Yeah. The reason that difficult conversations are so hard is the exact reason for what you're trying to do here. Being able to act in the face of uncertainty.
Yeah.
When I'm having a tough conversation, I have no idea what the other person's going to say, what they're going to do, what they're going to accuse me of, what they're going to bring out. I have no idea. You want to talk about walking into uncertainty? When I just want to hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and get on with the job, right? That's why we avoid that, because we don't know what's going to happen. And we've heard so many horror stories about how awful people are that, I myself, and I teach this stuff, I will agonize over a tough conversation. Like, I won't bring it up unless I have, and I tell I'm in a new relationship right now. And I told them, I'm like, look, if I ever complain about something or bring up a problem, I've probably thought about it for about 2 weeks before I like how I'm going to say it. Like, it's a big deal if I bring it up. I'm getting better, but still. One of the things we need to do is just learn how to have these conversations well. And somebody said something to me once that like really like hit. They said, you need to think about calling them in versus calling them out.
Oh, I like that.
Right? It's calling them into a collaborative problem solving conversation versus calling them out for doing something wrong. When I shift my thinking to that, I now am much better able to deal with the conversation. And because I'm not like yelling at them, I'm trying to solve a problem. We're adults here. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where I like to start.
And I imagine I think in a world of uncertainty, obviously, I mean, you said this, what employees feel out of control. They're looking for certainty. They're looking for what they can count on. It's why trust is so important. So if I can count on you as a leader to keep me in the loop as to what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong, then I am far more stable and comfortable and probably more willing to take some level of risk. Would that be accurate?
Yes, absolutely. Some level of risk, some level of ownership. My
Yeah.
emotional intelligence goes up because psychological safety goes up. I know that you're going to give it to me straight one way or the other. And trust goes up in an incredible way too. Now, if we can get away from being the absolute lawnmower that your other boss that you liked working with, we can find a kindness and a little bit of a
Yes.
softer approach within that honesty and that straightforwardness. Holy cow, relationships flourish. And
Yeah.
Tony Ambrosa, he was a tough one. You knew when you didn't do something well, but that ownership was there because you're like, he wouldn't be saying this if it wasn't true. And so
Yeah.
figuring out a way in your own style to be able to have those conversations and welcome that two-way dialogue in an emotionally intelligent, non-defensive way is huge.
Yeah. And I think that far too often, I always say to leaders I'm working with, you're confusing being liked with being respected. And
Yes.
if you choose like first, you'll lose respect. If you choose respect first, you still can be liked,
Mhm.
but you can't have them. You really can't have them. The other thing I think too is far too often, I feel like if I'm avoiding the tough conversation, then it's about me.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to be upset with me. I don't want you to yell at me. I don't want to be uncomfortable. Versus, I'm getting ready to go to work for this company that their number one value is they just love their employees. That is how everybody they hire. That's like, if you think people are working for you, you do not belong here. You are working for them. I mean, they're just their whole platform is service, service, service. And so what they were saying is they reach out with those tough conversations in a point of love. Like, if I help you understand where you're not performing, you could perform. And if you performed, you could go up in the company and things like that. And I think we get it a bit backwards.
Yeah. And I think that honesty and transparency is huge, but also like the being real about it and
Yes,
saying the things, we want to smooth things over. We want to give people what they want, but we don't always have to in order
right.
to get that respect.
Yeah.
There was a lot Tony couldn't do that,
Yes.
and he would be like, yeah, that's not going to be possible. Now let's get creative. How can we achieve what you were trying to achieve in a different way?
Yeah. We
You know,
love Tony. We all want to work for
Tony,
Tony,
Tony
don't
was a good boss, I got to tell
we?
you.
Yeah.
And he opened a tough can of worms with that conversation,
Yes.
but we got through it together and we all knew where he was coming from. So,
Yeah. You know what I love about that story? I've got a boss that I speak about that I'm going to age myself here, but I worked for him 37 years ago. And I think about every time I tell the story from the stage that I thought 37 years ago, and it still has that much impact on
yeah.
me. That if you really rise to the occasion and be the type of leader you can be, it's really impactful.
Loyalty is huge if you can do that because it's so rare. It's true. And it all comes down to the emotional intelligence and being able to show up in a way for your people and for the larger mission in the organization, not just to be right, to have power, to be the boss. And
Yeah.
that's the shift, right? And there's so much more power in that emotionally intelligent approach than there is in that clinging to power approach. And yet so often leaders miss it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, it is hard to believe, but we are at the end of this podcast. And I always like to end with two questions, and you can answer them in either order. Number one, how do people find out about you? How do they find out about the work that you do, follow you, hire you for emceeing, speaking engagements, listen to your podcast? And the second is, if you could give one piece of advice to our audience members out there struggling with all of this uncertainty and change, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, so my website's yourchangespeaker.com. You can find the website and the blog and the email list and all of them. You hire me to speak, all of that's there. So yourchangespeaker.com. And then last piece of advice is don't do it alone.
Oh, I love that.
I end my keynotes with a song, a custom medley, and I get the audience singing along with me, which everybody's like, but it works because we get a little uncomfortable and then we come together in an incredible way. And if we choose not to do it alone, it makes it a whole lot easier.
What an incredible piece of advice. Don't do it alone. Don't face all of this uncertainty. Don't face the change, and don't go through it without a group of people around you. And you have been an incredible guest. Audience, I want to thank you again for joining us for another powerful episode of Ask for Change. Join us right back here next week, where together we are going to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. I'll see you next week.